welcome to our daily Facebook live stream. I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and we specialise in providing HR advice, support, services to small to medium-sized businesses and not-for-profit organisations that are regionally based. So welcome to those who are joining us for the first time, and to others who have become regulars in terms of joining us on our daily Facebook live streams. Welcome. It's delightful to have you with us today, and to chew over some of the really important things that we need to be mindful of as employers and employees. We made this decision 9 weeks ago today, actually, to start this daily Facebook live stream. And good morning to those who are joining us this morning. So we made this decision 9 weeks ago today to commence a daily Facebook live stream, and our idea was to bring information and advice and resources to small to medium businesses and not-for-profit organisations, particularly those that are regionally based, to help you through these really challenging COVID-19 times. So our intention is to try and cut through the swathes of information that are coming at us constantly at the moment, to make sense of things as they're evolving and changing, and to also talk about particular topics and areas that our audience are telling us that they'd really like to know more about, or topics that we think it's important for you to be aware of in the current context. So please ask any questions that you might have as we go along. You can pop them there in the chat screen this morning. I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I'll take them on notice and answer them in our live stream tomorrow morning. Obviously, you can also contact us in a range of different ways. You can direct message us, of course. And good morning, Naomi, and to Jess. Lovely to see you both this morning. So you can also get hold of us email or phone, website. I'm sure in just a moment my wonderful team are going to put those details up in the chat screen for you. And feel free to contact us. We are available 24/7. We may take up to 24 hours to come back to you on email at the moment. We have significant volume of inquiries and issues that employers are having as they're trying to navigate these really tricky times. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're more than happy to walk beside you with appropriate social distancing, and to support you and your staff through this really tricky time. So what do we need to know today? What things have shifted in the last 24 hours since yesterday? We know that we've only had 13 new cases in Australia, 7 in Victoria and 6 in New South Wales, and none in any of the other states or territories. We know that there's been some glitches with the COVID Safe app, but apparently that is now fully functional, and about 5.5 million people have downloaded that. Our Chief Medical Officer has reminded us that if you haven't had your flu shot, now's the time. It's important to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. And there's an extra Deputy Chief Medical Officer that's been appointed to the team that are managing or making sort of assessments and determinations about the health implications of the current pandemic. There's been an extra Deputy CMO that's been appointed to manage the psychological fallout of the pandemic. And of course today we're back talking about health and safety, and we'll get into that as well. So it's not just the physical implications of the pandemic. There's lots of mental health and wellness challenges that we as employers and employees are really challenged by at this point in time. And so it's incredibly important to know that at the most senior levels there's adequate resourcing that's being given to that. So yesterday, when I started this sort of 2-session series on work health and safety obligations, I was focused on making sure that employers and their staff understood what the lawful obligations were for employers, and how to navigate those obligations. I realised that often the content and concepts of health and safety can seem a bit dry and a bit tedious, and sometimes business owners perceive those requirements as onerous, and also as potentially slowing them up or preventing them from delivering their goods and services. I think it's really important to be absolutely clear, and today, I guess, in the discussion around health and safety and what does normal look like now, which is the topic for today, is to remember that health and safety is each and every one of our responsibility. So that includes lawfully. So obviously the people conducting a business or undertaking, PCBUs under the legislation, which is myself as a business owner and any of you who own and run businesses, those who are at the top of that pyramid, if you like, are the ones that had the most to lose in terms of financially and lawfully. But it's your staff who have the potential to lose a limb or their life or their mental wellness. And we really can't emphasise strongly enough how serious an undertaking that is. I think as humans, we like to think that, circumstances that we see around us won't impact us, that we're not going to get sick or we're not going to have an injury in our work environment. That there's this sort of sense of invincibility sometimes I think that we have. And it's really important, and this COVID pandemic is giving us a great opportunity to really challenge that for ourselves, because nobody is potentially able to not be impacted by this pandemic, and it's a salient reminder, I think, of those responsibilities. And the other thing, I guess, that it reminds me of is that yes, we have fairly strict legislation and regulations around work health and safety, but each and every one of those regulations has come out of a case of serious injury or death. And so it can and it does happen, and it can and it does happen to businesses just like yours and mine. And so when we start having a look, as we will now, going into what does normal look like now, it's incredibly important to remember why we have those responsibilities, and to be very clear about knowing what our risks are and doing the best we can to mitigate those, and involving our staff. We want fundamentally for our staff to be able to come to and leave work wherever that's taking place at the moment safely and well. And I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want to be having the conversation with the partner or the family of one of my team who injured themselves or was killed in the process of working for me, and I didn't do everything that I could have to prevent that situation from happening, or to inform myself, inform my staff, and make sure that we had everything in place we could. It doesn't stop, freak things happening that we can't necessarily prepare for, of course. But I think we can be a little bit too relaxed in terms of our obligations, and I really want to bring the human side to health and safety this morning for that very reason. Working in HR, as I've done for many years, I've had the fortune and misfortune, I guess, depending on how you look at it, to be aware of a whole range of different health and safety issues that have been seriously impactful for the people who've experienced them, the organisations that have had them happen, and it's life-changing for everybody. So I can't emphasise enough how seriously we really need to take it, and the pandemic is a great opportunity for us to do that. Okay, so what does normal look like now? Well, I guess it's not a surprise for me to say that everything has changed. Obviously, in the last 2 to 3 months, we've seen fairly significant public health orders and restrictions. It's meant some businesses have not been able to operate in any form. Others have had to radically repivot. And now from tomorrow, we're seeing, certainly in New South Wales, and it's already been started to be relaxed in other states and territories. Some will be following suit in the coming weeks. We're starting to see some relaxation on those restrictions, and we're starting to see seated venues, for example, cafes and restaurants being able to have a maximum of 10 people, retail stores, same thing, still with the expectations around social distancing, 4 square metre rule, provision of hygiene and cleaning and hand sanitising and so forth facilities. But let me be really clear that for the last 2 to 3 months while we've been navigating this, I think there's been a temptation to think it's temporary. But what I firmly believe is that the kinds of changes that we're seeing, everything has and will continue to be changed. So whether it's hospitality, retail, or office designs, so the ways in which those spaces are now need to function and how they will be designed moving forward, needs to permanently change. We're not going to be able to return to hot desking situations and people crammed together in open plan environments and tiny meeting rooms and things like that. The ways we have shopped and dined and work will have to be and remain fundamentally changed, because this virus isn't going away anytime soon, and it's not the first one that we'll likely have. So the ways in which we need to interact socially, at work, economically, all of those things, I realise restrictions are starting to be relaxed, but I can't see a time at this point where we won't have social distancing obligations in terms of the 1.5 metres and limitations on the numbers of, or not so much the numbers, but the spacing that will be required in venues for people to be in. So I think as business owners, we need to be setting about making permanent changes to the way that we work moving forward in order for us to be able to be responsive when things change and change quickly. We've certainly learnt a lot already, and we will continue to learn a great deal from what this pandemic has shown us. But it won't be the first emergency, and need to pivot that businesses will need to take. And so I think it's really important to know that that those changes that we've had to navigate are not going away anytime soon. So on a practical level, as I shared yesterday, we as business owners right now need to be paying attention, really, really close attention to our health and safety obligations in ways that we have not done before. And look, there's been a great temptation, despite the law, despite the regulations, despite the almost daily news stories of a wall that collapsed and injured people yesterday in a construction site in Sydney, and people who were being killed and maimed, and their lives changed forever, and those of their families and their networks, by ill-considered decisions in work environments and not taking those responsibilities really seriously. So just in relationship to the pandemic, let alone anything else, we need to be paying attention. We need to have appropriate signage in place in our work environments. We need to have regular and frequent communications happening with all of our team and with our clients and with our public, where we are client-facing and public-facing in the work that we do. Cleaning needs to be on a whole other level to what it was 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks ago. We need not just to be thinking about the physical ramifications, but the mental health ramifications as well. What about the need now potentially, well not potentially, but I think importantly for a lot of businesses, most businesses, to be taking their staff through mental health first aid, and knowing how we need to respond to mental health challenges in the work environment. So I think clearly you'll see I'm passionate about this, I guess not the least of which because I'm an employer myself and I wouldn't want to be having that conversation that I mentioned earlier. Also, though, obviously I'm in the business and my team are in the business of people. That's what we do 24/7, and we help business owners get better and be better at the management and the support and the taking care of their people. And work health and safety is all about your people. It can and it does happen. Incidences and issues and serious things happen and do happen to businesses like ours, like yours. Every aspect of work health and safety legislation and regulations has come from a serious injury or a death, so we need to take it seriously. And there's a real opportunity right now with this pandemic to for all of us to take stock of what our responsibilities are, and to really put energy and focus into that, because I can tell you right now, the research tells us that where employers do that, where they meaningfully integrate having a healthy and safe work environment into everything that they do, that becomes part of the way things are done around here. It becomes part of their culture. It helps contribute to making them an employer of choice, and their staff actually feel like the organisation they work for cares about them and has their safety and health up there as a priority for doing business. Work health and safety is not just about slips, trips and falls, though. I need to be really clear about that. It's also, and increasingly so, about mental health and well-being. I want to give you a few examples that I have seen and been involved in, which I guess just bring to life the health and safety obligations and implications that each of us as business owners have. I think it's a reminder for all of us, whether we're business owners or whether we're staff, or whether we're not working at the moment, that everything we do affects someone else around us. And as employers, and I'm speaking to those of you who are employers, we are ultimately responsible, lawfully, morally, ethically, you name it. And so we really need to inform ourselves and inform our staff and train our staff and do the things that are the right things to be doing, not just because they're lawful. The first example I would give you was very much a health and safety issue. So an educational organisation that I had done some work with had a teacher who had a sterling reputation, was brilliant at what they did and was very well known for their excellence in teaching. They missed a couple of classes, and that was highly unusual. And so fellow colleagues of this teacher let the supervisor know that this had happened. And on one particular occasion, another colleague actually found this teacher in one of the building corridors, seeming quite disoriented and couldn't find her way back to her office. Fortunately, this organisation was pretty switched on in terms of what to or seeking advice about what to do. So they talked to me as the HR senior in that organisation, and what we did was we didn't want to make any presumptions, of course, about what might be behind the situation, but the situation was serious. Not only was there a serious concern about the health and safety of this particular teacher, but also the implications for other staff who were quite distressed by the situation, and also for the reputation of the business in terms of classes being missed and students having things missed and so forth. So we ended up having a meeting with this teacher, and they brought a support person with them, and we talked to them about the things that had been observed, and we'd made no assumption about what was happening with that, but just to invite the staff member to talk to us. That person's family member that were with them actually raised in the session that this was something that had been observed outside the workplace as well. What ended up happening was that the staff member agreed to us organising an independent medical assessment for them. We made no assumption that there was anything medical going on, but with the staff members' agreement, we thought that was probably best to look into that first. And with their agreement, we sent them for some testing and assessment. The upshot of that situation was that ultimately that teacher ended up being diagnosed with early onset and very rapidly advancing dementia. Regrettably, that very valued colleague only lived another 6 months, and it was incredibly distressing to everybody that worked with her. But to that organisation's credit, they really dealt with that with great empathy. They immediately got onto the issue. They sought advice. It was handled sensitively and empathetically, and support was provided to the staff member, to all of their colleagues, to the students, and to the staff member's family. So that was clearly a health and safety issue, and a very distressing one for everybody to be involved in, but it could have been a whole lot more distressing to all the people involved in that situation had it not been handled really well. Another example I want to give you of a health and safety issue was we were engaged by a manufacturing organisation to help them get their HR and health and safety ducks in a row. They had been, by their own admission, quite blasé about health and safety, which was a little bit of a concern given the kind of environment and the manufacturing environment that they were in. But they at least recognised that that was the case, and so we'd been taking their staff through health and safety training and policy and so forth for a while, and we'd started with, long-standing staff grumbling and complaining about having to spend time in training around health and safety when they knew it all and they knew exactly what to do and so forth. But this is a case of how much that training and awareness raising actually can come into play and really help prevent an injury. And on this particular occasion, this factory environment had been, it was a couple of winter seasons ago, had been decimated with the flu. So they'd been working on a skeleton staff in the factory environment for quite some time. And on this particular occasion, one of the factory workers turned up for their shift and was feeling a little bit ordinary, did their day, was feeling worse during the day, thought, oh gosh, no, not me as well. I can't afford to go down sick. Everybody else is sick and we're operating on, minimal staff as it is. So he ducked past the chemist on the way home after his shift finished that afternoon, talked to the chemist. Chemist gave him some behind-the-counter cold and flu meds, went home, took them as directed, came back to work the next morning, feeling a lot better, slept really well. But on the production line that next morning, one of his colleagues noticed that his cognition was really off, and was really concerned about it. Went up to him and said, "Hey mate, you feeling all right?" And he said, "Actually, yeah, a hell of a lot better than I was yesterday afternoon before I finished shift." And he explained that, he'd been feeling pretty ordinary, thought he was coming down with a flu, went to the chemist, got some meds, had a great sleep, feels fantastic. His colleague said, "Yeah, but that's all fine, except that you can't tell that your hand-eye coordination's pretty off this morning." "No, mate, I'm fine." Anyway, the colleague was really worried, and so he, as our training with the guys had informed him, he went and saw the shift supervisor, and he said, "Look, I've talked to me mate. I'm just really concerned. Can you come and have a look?" So he observed him for a while. He was also concerned, so he, went to the staff member and had a chat. They had a chat and discovered that this cold and flu medication that the chemist had given the staff member has not been one that he had ever had before. And yes, he'd slept like a baby, and yes, he was feeling like $1,000,000, and that was the pseudoephedrine that was in the cold and flu medication. But it had unknowingly affected his cognition quite badly, and he couldn't see it, but everybody else could. So the supervisor immediately put him on duties for the rest of the shift that weren't going to cause him any harm or harm to any colleagues in the production line. And that was only because we had been going through this health and safety training and process with the staff. We'd recently covered off on the impact of alcohol and drugs, and including over-the-counter, behind-the-counter and prescription medications, and letting the workplace know if you're on any medication that could impact your safety at work. Whether it's operating machinery or, in this gentleman's case, operating on a production line where there's dangerous equipment. So in this particular instance, that was potentially a near miss. But everybody was on the ball. Everybody's awareness was raised in terms of their health and safety obligations. So the colleague certainly met his. He could see that there was a potential issue. He talked to his mate. His mate said, oh no, everything's fine. He still didn't think things were fine. He went and saw the shift supervisor. They sorted it out. But that could have been a really terrible situation. With another client that we had, it was a trades organisation, and they had also, we had been working with them to bring their health and safety obligations and training and all of those things up to speed, and really make sure everybody was acutely aware of appropriate process and what have you. On this particular instance, there was a painting booth, and there was a tradie who was working in that booth with an untucked and frayed shirt. He turned his back on a naked flame, and that shirt went up. He ended up with 30% burns to his back and his neck. The immediate response, due to the health and safety training that that team had and the recent updating of their emergency equipment, so fire blankets, first aid supplies, etc., prevented an even more serious outcome. And actually the emergency responders to that situation said absolutely that had made an enormous difference to the outcome for this particular staff member. Now, because that was a near miss under health and safety legislation, that part of the business had to be sectioned off and left for a WorkSafe inspector. And that's what happens when you have a situation like that. So that was a terrible situation that did result in an injury to a staff member, which fortunately they recovered from. It certainly reminded people about shirts being untucked, frayed ends, all of those things that can be health and safety hazards to somebody in an environment like this guy was working in. But it also was a much better outcome than what it could have been, because there had been attention, training, awareness raising, etc. I'm also aware of a work health and safety prosecution of a company which was found responsible for the death of one of their staff. This particular company was in relationship to a girder manufacturing line. What had happened was that they had taken a guard off a piece of equipment that was perceived as slowing down the production, and somebody was compressed and killed by a girder as a consequence. And the main issue with that prosecution was that the owner/manager of that business had told the staff to take the guard off because it was slowing down production. That directly led to the death of a staff member, and that was something that clearly his family and his network and his colleagues never recovered from that situation. Another example was a meat processing plant, where a gentleman staff member was working on a different line in that particular meat processing facility. It was on a particular line that needed overalls. But those overalls that the staff member was given for the purposes of working on that line didn't fit. And the combination of that and the fact, again, that an equipment guard had been removed, and this person had only had minimal training on how to operate the equipment on that particular part of the meat processing facility. And the fact that the guard was off this particular machinery that this staff member was operating, the machine caught the front flap of the coveralls that were too big. So as this person was bending forward, there was a big sort of gaping gap in the front of their coveralls. And that person was dragged into the mincer machine. and he and the lower half of his body were terribly damaged, including his genital area. And he lived, but he was scarred for life, as were a whole range of other people connected to him in his work and his home environment. And that was a terrible situation. And again, the overalls weren't the right fit. So the PPE, if you like, the personal protective equipment, didn't fit correctly. And for convenience to speed up production, the guard or perceived inconvenience of the guard that was protecting this particular piece of machinery, a mincer, had been taken off, because that was a pain in the ass to have to deal with. I could go on. I won't, because there's way too many examples that I could give you. But this happens every day in businesses like yours and businesses like mine. Everything we do affects someone else around us, and as the employer, we are ultimately responsible. One of the sessions we're going to look at next week is, look, it's been a couple of months now at least. Have you been making sure that your staff are healthy and safe working remotely? I've got a team that are all working from their respective homes. Are you, or have you become just quite relaxed about it and potentially taken your eye off the ball? So we're going to talk about that next week as a particular topic. But it's incredibly important that each and every one of us as business owners, and all of you as staff that are tuning into this as well, are understand and pay attention to and follow good policy and practices in the workplace regarding work health and safety. If you're not sure, if you're a business owner watching this and going, oh, look, I know that's important, but I don't even know where to start, give us a call. Give us a call, get in touch, we can help you. Absolutely be delighted to help you, because I don't want you ringing me after something has gone terribly wrong. We can help, and absolutely will help, but you're going to wish that you were, half a day ahead of where you ended up. I promise you. I've seen it way too many times. Make sure that you have a really good awareness of what your responsibilities are. Make sure you train your staff. Make sure everybody in your work environment understands their own health and safety obligations for themselves and the people that they work alongside. It's really important that you communicate regularly and often with your staff, not only during the COVID pandemic about what's happening right now, but moving forward. These health and safety obligations have already existed well before we had COVID, but COVID is a reminder. And indeed, it's interesting that, it only reinforces how serious our responsibilities are. The fact that National Cabinet established 10 COVID-19 work health and safety principles. They've set up Safe Work Australia as to be the repository for toolkits and information and checklists and so forth for businesses to make sure that they're operating in a healthy and safe way during the COVID pandemic. But our health and safety obligations go well beyond that. It just so happens that we're in a situation right now where it's really come to the fore. And never more have your obligations been more under the microscope and more necessary than now. So check out the work health and safety obligations that you have. As I said, the Safe Work Australia website is a good place to start. It is the central repository right now for information. Yesterday I was referring to a couple of the Safe Work Australia checklists that are up there that you can easily access. And I guess the most important thing I would say to you is get advice and plan. Plan to make sure that your health and safety obligations are executed. Talk to your staff. We can help you. It doesn't have to take a very long time, and it doesn't have to take a huge amount of effort to get those plans and policies in place and make sure that everybody is sufficiently educated so that they can do their work safely and well, and so that they're not causing anybody else in the work environment to potentially not be safe either. So get advice, plan, have good, robust training policies, etc. in place. certainly right now, immediately inform yourselves and understand what your obligations are in the COVID environment, which I went through in some detail yesterday. Communicate frequently and regularly with your staff, and be vigilant. Please be vigilant. Much better that you're over vigilant than insufficiently so. So thank you so much for tuning in this morning. This particular topic, what do things look like now? What do we need to be aware of? What does normal look like now? My reinforced message to that is what it looks like right now is likely to be what it's going to continue to have to be like moving forward. So whether it's shop design, whether it's workplace design, whether it's the way that you do business, whether it's the practices in your work environment, the way that you've had to radically change and pivot, and you may still be needing to do that if you're one of the businesses that is gradually going to be re-emerging during the easing of restrictions, talk to us, because it's incredibly important that you get this right. Everybody's lives depend on it. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you participating in this. Please send us your questions. I haven't had any in the chat screen today, but I'd be delighted to answer them for you. Don't hesitate to send us messages, phone us, get in touch over the website, etc. Tomorrow I'll be talking about what if it's all too hard. So I've had a lot of businesses essentially ask me that question. How do I know if it's time to not be doing this anymore? It might be that you've had no choice. It might be that you really are struggling to see the next week, the next fortnight, the next 3 months. I'll answer the curly questions tomorrow. So please join us. Invite your colleagues and friends. We'd love them to be well informed as you are in this process. So in the meantime, please hug the people that you can. Please wave cheerily at those that you'd love to but you can't at this point in time. Stay safe, stay home where you can, wash your hands, and we'll really look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us.